Holy effing crap. I can't even believe there's 12 people still here. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Camera and Flask. And David is just going to watch The Professional. So that is completely understood. We're down to 10, 7, 0. I don't know what's going. I know it's working. And by the way, nothing has changed on my end except for the fact that it decided to work. So I've still got a lot of research to do this coming week. And there's some people here. So it's kind of a miracle that you guys hung around. I'm glad you're chatting. I'm glad you're here. I am in the barn. It is about 102 degrees Fahrenheit. So what is that? That's got to be like 37, 38, maybe? It's up there in terms of Celsius and Fahrenheit. David's still here. He might be watching The Professional on another screen at the same time. I don't know. I would like to first say hello to everybody who has stuck around. Sky London, which I just flew out of yesterday. Nigel, if you're still here. Travis. Bad Karma 714, 360 Grad, no Grumpy Penguin. We got Harrison here, David. We've got Bill Pan, and I'm sure there's some other people that I am not saying hello to. Joseph, how are you? And if you want me to answer a very specific question on the live stream, please do an @ and the C47 so I can see that it's flagged. Just like David did when he said my Yelp rating just went down. LOL. So here we are. It is Wednesday, August 28th, 2019. This is episode 39, though Ben would argue it is probably episode 45, maybe 60. Who knows? He has a theory. I went back today and I looked at that, and I don't know if he's right. Welcome to my channel, the C47. And if you are new here for some reason, I doubt it now that we've had these technical issues, then welcome and please subscribe even after this debacle. So there you go. So let's talk a little bit. First of all, just a little bit of housekeeping. Number one, Caleb is in California. He is at an event related to the S1H and lenses announcements from Panasonic. A lot of hubbub going on the internet. And what's up with Ben? Well, listen, 360 Grad. Ben is on a vacation, which I just came back from. Not the one with him, but in a different place. And the location that he arrived at yesterday is a very small apartment with his family, and he was going to broadcast from the beach across the street. Still internet, still enough juice there to do it. And then today, it was dead quiet last night. There are some Polish bikers. Cyclists? No, bikers. I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm just saying that's the reality, so he can't do it. And on top of that, his internet dropped in terms of upload to 0.5 megabits per second. So probably going to be a fail anyway. David is moving on to gin and tonic. Long day ended with wings and many beers. Already buzzed too. All right, Sam. Shazam the iPad producer. What a name. What do you think about the XF405? That's a Canon camera, or the EOS R for video, music videos mostly, and doc work. So again, make sure you use @the C47 to tag me, but Shazam, the iPad producer, both very different camera systems. You're talking about a mirrorless full-frame camera as opposed to a smaller chip, 1-inch chip, kind of all-in-one fixed lens camera. So I did a whole series on the XF400, 405 on Canon's YouTube channel and their learning site, so you can check that out. Don't have enough experience with the EOS R, though I'm hearing very good things, and it's a very capable camera. Though with some of the recent offerings, I think, unless you want to stay in the Canon ecosystem, which is totally fine, you might want to consider some of the other things that are happening. There it is. Six String Brian is back. He was here this morning. And Bad Karma 714, I don't know what you were right about, but my birthday yours is Saturday, so happy birthday ahead of time, whatever that is. By the way, I'm 8 hours ahead in terms of the way I'm functioning, which is because I just flew back from the UK. I'm a little messed up, I gotta say, with the heat wave, the technical issues, my boy's not being here. I don't know what's going on. I'm on some new platform called Lightstream, which I'm digging, but the communication between Lightstream, YouTube Studio, bunch of crap. I didn't say that out loud, did I? They might demonetize me. We'll get the deal. No grip tips. Hopefully will show up. Again, I don't know what's going to happen here. We're not going to run for a full hour, but we do have some things to talk about. I specifically want to talk a little bit about the S1H. I want to talk a little bit about these new Sony cameras, the 6100 and the 6600. And then we're going to have some chats here. As always, general questions are welcome. And next week, both the boys should be back, and we will be back to having our normal drinks. I'm going to have something because you're here. I don't like to drink alone. I have some exceptionally good new scotches that I have brought back from my motherland where I was born, but I'm not going to drink those today. Nigel's in the UK. Hey, Nigel, I'm on your time zone. And there you go. So I'm just going to go with the old standby here. It's the Glenlivet 12. I'm actually, this is not the right one here. This is Tomatin, which is a Highland whiskey. This is the 14. I'm not thrilled about this one, but they make another one, not this one in the port cast, that is, it's exceptionally good value. It is 12-year. Aged in 2 casks, and I would say that that's really probably going to be my bottle that's going to always be in the cabinet. I have to go back and, sorry about that, but the Glenlivet 12 was kind of that before, when I don't want to drink the fancy stuff. So cheers to everybody who hung around for this stream, and thank you for hanging in there and having a chat. I'm glad we're getting to do some stuff here, and we'll have a nice conversation, except for somebody saying something about 125 frames per second. Hold on. Okay, cheers. Just a little wee dram. Okay, so what do we got here? Harrison, do you know if there's any crop at 120 frames per second on the S1H? I think somebody says there is. There is no crop. I believe if you want to shoot in 6K, there is a crop, and that is my understanding. I may be wrong. Go to newsshooter.com. It's the main article that's on the website that you need to check out and all that fun stuff. And you should be able to find that there. Here, I'll just give you guys a quick link. Boom. There we go. Hopefully I don't screw this whole thing up. You know News Shooter. They got a lot of information. They were at the event, and I'm sure we'll see a lot of other information there. The thing that I do want to talk about with this camera is, well, first of all, we have to acknowledge the fact that in a mirrorless camera system, full frame, this has got some stuff that we haven't seen before. But it's also $4,000 US. So we're talking a price point which really starts to make you think about form factor a lot. Do you want to go into something that is that small and then start to build it up with, you know, something on the hot shoe for XLR inputs? You've got to add some sort of ND system and all of that. Or do you just want to start to go and look at a smaller form factor digital cinema camera, FS5, C200. I'm not saying the C200 is the same price, but you start to think about that kind of stuff, because if you take one of those, in fact, the FS5 II, which is not my favorite camera in the world, but is sitting in that price point. And if you take some of the other cameras and you look at where they are in terms of starting price point with their recent price drops, and then you take the S1H and you add all the GAC to it to get it to the point where you can use it that way, then you start to think about it as a $5,000 to $6,000 camera. And that means you have to really want that camera for what it's giving you in terms of its features, and also that you want to work with that form factor. So I don't know, Nigel, if it's true that it can't output from HDMI to Atomos, because I have seen, maybe you haven't seen, that there is a press release about being able to do RAW over HDMI to the Atomos recorder. So I'm pretty sure that's not true. I think you are going to be able to do that. And if you drop your internal recording format to 10-bit 420, it's crazy that we're talking about dropping it to that, then you can simultaneously output to 6K RAW out of HDMI, to my understanding. Is it there yet? Is it a future firmware update? Quite honestly, after getting home last night with a family of 5, I'm not 100% sure. Check the News Shooter article. I'm sure it'll keep getting updated. But it is an interesting camera because we're talking about a 6K camera system. We're talking about a camera that's full frame. We're talking about 10-bit 422 internal recording. We're talking about unlimited record times. Apparently, heat dissipation is really good on this camera. So I think it's going to be an interesting one. That and this new Sigma, which is supposed to be the smallest full frame that will also do RAW externally. I don't know. It's going to be, it's going to be good. This is going to be one heck of a 4 months of camera stuff that we're going to be talking about. There's going to be no lack of conversation. And then, of course, Sony comes along. And what do? They actually, David is ridiculous on these comments. Sony comes out with 2 APS-C cameras. Now, let me give you my take very quickly on these Sony cameras. The 6100, really, and then the 6600. What's interesting about this is they've essentially taken what they have in the 6500. They've added much better AF, IAF for people and animals for video. And they have additionally, I believe, maybe I'm wrong about this, they have added a headphone jack. So I might be wrong about the 6500 not having a headphone jack, but I'm pretty sure that those are the 2 of the big additions to the camera system. But here's where, for me, it sort of ends as a conversation. We take a look at that 6600, you're talking about $1,400 US for the camera body. And if you look at that, what I then need to look at with all of this great technology in there is the format that it's recording to. Because it was fine for the A7 S series earlier on. You could even say that it was fine for the A7 III. But when we're talking about cameras that people are seriously, well, A7 III they are seriously considering for video as well. But when you're thinking about that, you're talking about recording internally at 8-bit. And for me, the biggest problem that I'm seeing right now with Sony mirrorless is the data rate or lack thereof. When you're recording on a camera system in HD and your standard recording data rate is 50 megabits per second, and we take a look at UHD 4K, 3840 by 2160, that's 4 times full HD. And so that means that in order to retain the same quality of image that you are getting from that 50 megabits per second recording on that camera system, you should be recording at 200 megabits per second. The problem is with Sony cameras, you are recording at a maximum of 100 megabits per second internally, and it is 8-bit. And I don't think that that is what you should be looking for right now in a small mirrorless hybrid camera system. I'm not telling you to go out and buy a Fujifilm camera, but I am telling you that spec for spec, but also real world wise, a camera like the X-T3 is beating out that Sony in pretty much every category. Now, E-mount, incredibly versatile, so you have to consider that. Also, what is your prior investment into the camera system? But I have a hard time looking at the 6600 and saying to a new buyer or even an upgrade path buyer that that's what you should be seriously considering. You know, if you take a look at a GH5 and you add a speed booster, I think that you're looking at a much more capable camera system all around than you are at that 6600. Andres, happy to be here and not under Hurricane Dorian, which is Wow, it missed Puerto Rico. Thank goodness, because not only do you not need that in Puerto Rico, but you also don't need to deal with another PR nightmare with the president of this country. So I'm glad to hear that. That is very good news, because I heard the path change and it was going towards Puerto Rico. So you will sleep better tonight. The IBIS was very bad, Bill says, for this A6600. Okay, well, that's good to know. Let's see. GH6 has to offer. I think, Nigel, you'll be waiting quite a long time for the GH6. I think between sort of looking historically at Panasonic with how long that GH4 was out, what they did with the GH5, and now with this S1H, I think you're going to be waiting a long time for that camera. But that's just my gut feeling. Let's see what else. Okay, so let me hear some of your thoughts on the S1H. As always with Cameron Flask, general production questions and comments and conversations are welcome between each of you while you chat with each other, but also an @the C47 to tag me if you want to ask me a specific question would be incredibly helpful. I'm just going to scroll back here and see if there's anything that I have missed. September 15th, by the way, for my birthday. So I'm smack right in the middle. And let's see. Oh, hey, Jem, happy birthday, Bad Karma. Oh, okay. So see, this is me getting all messed up. It's because the stream wasn't working, so I wasn't tracking with things. The other thing that trips me up about this is there's much more of a delay. So I'm talking to you guys right now and watching the chat. But when I'm monitoring the picture over here, it is probably about a 20-second lag. So it is some funky stuff that's going on here. Let's see what we got. Let's see. Okay, so what? Caleb, what? What do you? Oh, my God. Caleb, thank you. So it's a good thing you missed it because it's been a cluster. We'll talk more about that on the chat over the next couple of days. Golden boy, and I hope you had a good time in California. I can't wait to get the update. I've been gone for 3 weeks, and so Caleb and I really haven't spoken except for that abysmal episode where we did a half of Cameron Flask. But it's great to know that he is back, and it's all good stuff. So next week we get to drink some scotch that I get to introduce you to. I had an amazing time, way too much fish and chips, way too many pies, sandwiches with butter on them and all that good stuff, or bad stuff, depending on how you look at it. And today I've been eating a lot of vegetables and drinking a lot of water and some electrolytes and recovering and trying to stay up as late as I can. I was up for 23 hours yesterday. I wanted to go to bed at a normal time. I think it was good, even though I woke up a few times. Too much information. There you go. Yes, 20-second delay. Everybody's give a shout out to Caleb at DSLR Video Shooter. And it's a beautiful thing. So this S1H, really Caleb has the most hands-on experience of anybody who's in this chat room. And I'm sure he's going to get back to his family now, as he should. And next week he can give us a little bit more of a take. But I think it's a pretty interesting camera. I think that right now, again, if you are seriously looking at a camera that's either APS-C or full frame, and you're considering it for hybrid or just strictly for video in that form factor, then in Sony's land right now, I think really the only major contender is the A7 III, and then we are waiting for the unicorn camera to be announced. And when we're looking at other companies, you should really be looking at a camera system that is recording internally at least 10-bit 420 and somewhere between 200 and 400 megabits per second. So those would be my minimum requirements for 4K. Obviously, you'd want even a higher data rate than 200 if you are recording in 6K. And that's what's nice about what we're starting to see. And by the way, this new S1H is recording to SD cards, fast SD cards, but they've stuck with that. And they've also figured out, in theory, how to dissipate this heat. And you're going to be able to record for long times, we hope, fingers crossed. Okay, so what else we got? what else do we have for comments here? And man, I'm so bummed that this thing didn't work out properly earlier on. By the way, one of the good things about Lightstream is that in the future, I can create all of these different, essentially, kind of layers or different rooms or whatever you want to call them, and then I can feed up different things. So I can, press and I can push to you different graphics, and I can have lower thirds, and I can have different multi-up displays, which we did a little bit of I can't remember, it was 2 or 3 weeks ago for Camera and Flask, but it does give me a little bit more flexibility overall in terms of what can be pushed. That could be interesting educationally in the future for some of the things that I can do, not only with Camera and Flask, but also with Gearbox and the C47 in general for that channel. So David says, where can I go to learn about all the camera tech talk you guys are always throwing around? Well, I think, David, the answer to that is that it's an obsession. It's a disease. But really what winds up happening is we go to many different resources. Some of it comes from content creators, influencers, YouTubers who are just like us talking about these things all of the time. So we're getting different takes and different opinions. Definitely hitting Cinema 5D sometimes for information, newshooter.com as a main resource for me personally, and my friends, especially people like Caleb Pike, who is DSLR Video Shooter and his channel, and then the other cast of characters. And they continue to grow. And it's really nice to have that community of people. Caleb was hanging out with some of them for this event. And the whole idea is for us to be sharing knowledge and information and reading articles and understanding that buying a camera system has nothing to do with the spec sheet. The white papers are important because they give you insight into the camera system. But the specs are specs. Yes, they mean something, but it's real world use and getting feedback. Speaking of Yelp, it's I won't go to a restaurant unless it's got at least a 4 rating, 4.5. I'm like, okay, this is probably a good chance this is going to be interesting. And you have to read reviews like you do when you buy something on Amazon and figure out whether or not that was somebody sending things to people for free, or does it really feel like you're getting real opinions and honest feedback. Bad Karma 714, the new cameras from Canon not shooting 24 frames per second at certain resolutions. I don't understand that. I don't understand why they did that on the EOS R. Obviously, if you're shooting 4K, it's not an issue. But yeah. Bill, I have not tried OBS, and Caleb and I have had discussions about it. I may have to go that route if this Lightstream and YouTube connection doesn't seem to work well in the future, but we'll have to see what the deal is. So OBS takes a little bit more to set up. It's a little bit more involved, and I may have to go that route. But right now, if Lightstream is communicating with YouTube and Google can get their stuff together when it comes to this YouTube Studio beta, whereas the Classic was kind of working, I think they should have just kept Hangouts on air until they made the full transition and they had some other solutions, or at least there were some other recommendations. It was really hard to find Lightstream and figure out if that was going to be a good solution, and we'll have to see how it all goes. Or I might go back to Mimo Live, which I like very much as well, but I kind of feel like Lightstream is probably the most straightforward solution out there. So we'll see how it goes. So what else we got? And now we're all recording with the Ninja. What's up with DSLR Video Shooter? What up? Relay card writing 2 from Caleb. He's saying you can do relay card writing too. So if you wanted, you could hot swap cards indefinitely on the S1H. So I think that we're talking about a camera system that is definitely going to create a lot of content and could be really interesting. What are my thoughts on the upcoming Zcam models, Nigel asks. Again, just a little tip, and this comes from Caleb, and it's been helping me tremendously. If you just do an @the_C47, then when I'm checking out the chat, it's easy for me to identify that. I think that those are interesting. They're more interesting to me than the Confinity cameras. They're listed on B&H's website, which is great. Your base model is starting at $799, and we're gonna, again, I always say this, we have to get these cameras into the hands of people and really get their take on how these can be used effectively in the real world. They're going to have their own form of a compressed RAW, which is going to be interesting. And so now, well, I'm not saying they're in the same category as ProRes RAW and BMD or Blackmagic Design RAW, but it's all these different workflows, and I think that that's something that you have to consider. You know, right now, what we're waiting for is to figure out, hopefully by year's end with all these other cameras coming out, what we're going to be doing when it comes to a compressed RAW workflow. Now, obviously, Red has had this for a long, long time. Good implementation, great quality in files, but I think the promise of what we're starting to see from Blackmagic especially is really interesting. It's a licensing thing that's really the big deal, is can we, and yes, I know about the whole Apple Red thing as well, but can we start to see Blackmagic RAW in other apps? Or is this kind of the first time that we're really going to see Blackmagic as a company hold on to Blackmagic RAW as sort of their own proprietary thing for their internal ecosystem? Meaning their camera systems, obviously the big one being DaVinci Resolve. As of right now, when we're talking about working with that stuff, it does seem to be that we are kind of stuck with Resolve for that. Now, that may not be a problem for some people, but if you prefer to cut in Final Cut Pro 10 or in Premiere Pro, then you could have an issue with that. But I am excited, Nigel, about those Zcam cameras. I hope to get one or two of those cameras in my hands at some point and put them through their paces and give you my take on them. Obviously, there's been a lot of chatter related to a new Canon Cinema EOS camera, and you know, I will see. If Confinity got US support, would that change your mind? It would to a degree, but I think that as a company, you know, it was incredibly promising and exciting when they were the really low-cost alternative to Red. And then we have so much stuff now that's out and coming out related to RAW workflows that they're going to really have to step it up in terms of not only US distribution, but also having a direct-to-customer component to what they are doing. They're not strong in social. They don't have to be incredible, but you have to feel some confidence now, because it's not like you're going to drop $500 on their camera. You're going to be spending thousands of dollars, so you want to have some sort of connection with them as a company. So what do we got? Blackmagic over Zcam or Confinity. Gotta love the Ursa Mini. Look, I think Blackmagic's doing some really, really interesting stuff right now. They've definitely improved their color science. They've improved their user interface to what I consider one of the best in camera systems right now, especially from a touchscreen functionality. I think they're doing exceptionally well with that. I still don't necessarily consider them a camera company in the same way that I think of Arri and other companies like Sony and Panasonic and Canon. Those companies are set up from a support standpoint to take care of their customer base. And you can even buy into a different level of service if you want from those companies. And that's just not the way Blackmagic runs things, but I am very excited about what they're doing with their cameras. I think that there are, at times, from what I read, some quality control issues, but I think that overall, that what you're getting for your money is tremendous value, and I think it's exciting what they're doing. David says, I will be needing to find a camera in maybe 6 months that can be a jack of all trades, subject matter shooting for around $2,000. So David, that's definitely not something I'm going to tackle today, only because there are going to be so many more choices that are going to be available to people, and form factor should be your first decision. So I'm partially tackling this. One of the first things you need to decide when you're choosing a camera system is, before you even think about the specs, in my opinion, you have to think about, what kind of camera system do I want to work with? Do I want to work with a tiny little camera, and is there an advantage to using it in that form before you build it out? Or do you always want to have a larger camera and then build that out even more when you're doing things? Do you require certain things built into that camera system so that you can get up and running very, very quickly? Built-in neutral density filters, built-in XLR inputs, and things like that? Or are you okay stripping a camera down and putting it on a gimbal, sometimes with none of that stuff, and then building that camera up into a larger camera system for certain types of production? So form factor should be your first decision. You, of course, need to make a decision now whether or not you are going to spend very little and get an HD camera, full HD camera, which you can do with things like the C100, exceptional image quality, 4K sensor, but you will not be able to record a UHD 4K signal. Or are you going to, at this point in time, just say, look, it's ridiculous, I've got to buy a 4K camera system going forward because so much content is being created at that resolution. The delay on your feed can't be that bad, as I seem to be reading questions as I see them. Yes, so Sky, this is just a little note. When I'm monitoring this whole thing, there's a little bit of a delay, but I think that by the time, I don't know, I'm trying to think about that with jet lag. I'm glad. There's my answer to what you said. So David says narrative films will be the #1 use. Well, David, that's interesting. I think you still have to wait. I think that you also have to let me know whether or not this is a camera you're investing in for your film or films to be shot in, but you're going to be hiring a cinematographer or a DP, or if you plan to DP those projects yourself. I think that those will inform your decision to a certain degree when it comes to especially narrative work. So please let me know, because one of the advantages to having a DP, and you may be the DP, is having conversations about the right camera system for the type of project or projects that you're going to be doing. So any information on that would be useful. Joseph says, when do you think they'll update the BMD Micro Studio camera line? It feels like it's overdue in 6K with an SDI connection. I don't know. I mean, Micro Studio is 4K, correct? And if we look at that camera system, I don't know. I mean, they've got the sensor now, Super 35. We'll see where that all goes. I definitely don't think that we're just in a full frame world, everybody. I think that Super 35 APS-C is not just still a valid sensor size. I think that it's going to be used to create a lot of content in the future. You're wondering, Noir et Blanc V. I'm saying that wrong. Sorry. I'm wondering what you'd ask for in a C200 Mark II. Would you change in the, what would I change? So C200 for me is definitely the strongest form factor cinema EOS camera that I've used, and I've used them all and created a lot of content on all of them. It has a couple of issues for me. So #1 for the C200, I would say, is the menuing system. I think that the C300 Mark II has the most logical menu of all of the cinema EOS cameras that have come out, and they completely botched the menu system on the C200. They decided to try to hybrid it so that it was more like their DSLR cameras, which was ridiculous. It's like silly stuff, and I still scratch my head, excuse me. I still scratch my head every single time I use a camera in terms of decisions that they made in terms of how you can route things and what you can and can't do. For instance, you can't have HDMI and SDI out at the same time. Come on, what's up with that? You can't, it's just, SDI is only HD. What's up with that? So yes, menu system, but routings, I would change. Obviously, the big thing is I'd want the camera to be at least a fully capable 4K camera across the board. So I want, you know, at least 10-bit 422 coming out at a high data rate. Well, ideally over the HDMI, even RAW. But the SDI should be a full-on port. I really want a time code port on this camera. That's definitely another one for the C200. And love the touchscreen, love that flexibility. But then it comes down to recording formats or lack thereof. I think it's ridiculous. C300 Mark II, 410 megabits per second UHD 4K. We're in 10-bit 422. Nice color space, every option you could think of for the most part in terms of LUTing your image, in terms of Rec 709, P3, 2020, Cinema Gamut is not a LUT, obviously that's a capture space, but just tons of flexibility in terms of what you can do related to that, and then creating your own combinations of those. And we get none of that when you're recording to the SD cards on the C200 because you're basically in Rec 709. Yes, you get Canon Log 3 if you want it, and I would recommend using it. But your color space is always 709 when you're recording to the SD cards, and only up to 150 megabits per second. So I think that formats-wise, Canon Raw Light is nice on paper. The image that it captures is fantastic. I think we need to have a compressed RAW format on there that's a little bit more flexible to the CFast card. I'd love to see 2 CFast card slots on that camera system if they're going to commit to that, and I'd like to have all of the recording options that I have in the C300 Mark II. But really, honestly, I just want ProRes RAW. Just put that on the camera. Or, well, you're not going to get Blackmagic RAW. It's just a mess. It's not a mess. It's just there's issues having to do with saying, here's a C300 Mark II, which is a 4-plus-year-old camera. In my opinion, under $10,000, one of the best camera systems you can buy, with a lot of shortcomings. The main one really being, though, frame rate, or lack thereof in terms of options that you have. But if you really look at it as a 4K camera system, there is so much still going for that C300 Mark II, especially with the touch focus kit, where you get the LMV1 touchscreen that comes with the C200. You get the MA400, which is the XLR inputs. You get rid of the clamshell. Thank goodness. So I don't know. I just think it would be great if we did that. And I think it'd be great if they added the RF mount as an option. The other bummer, why'd you ask this question, is they have a locking EF mount that's available on some of their cameras, originally introduced on the C500. Put that on all your Cinema EOS cameras. Don't even make it an option. It's a locking EF mount. That's it. And I love the safety feature that Sony has put on their FS7 II, where basically it is a locking E-mount, but there's a safety so that when you basically release the lens, it doesn't just fall out. You actually have another release knob. I think that's great because people who are not used to PL or positive locking mounts that was developed by Area and used on cinema cameras all over the place, they're not used to that. So unless you are holding that lens or you have somebody holding that lens, then when you release it, boom, it's going down. Wow, okay, I didn't realize I was gonna say that much. Bill and chat, do you have any advice for good CV? I am creating one. I don't have a good solution for a good CV or resume. I mean, I'm just winging it here. I've been self-employed with my own company since 1996. So, you know, I have conversations, I show people my work, and I try to stay in a couple of different lanes, but not put all my eggs in one basket. So, I'm sorry, that's a horrible answer, Bill. So, Andres, Jem, I've been editing some content for a client for Facebook, and it was shot at 24. It is a 1-minute daycare promo. Would it have been better to shoot it at 30? The answer to that is, totally depends on whether or not you wanted that footage to look more realistic, more lifelike, or you want it to feel a little more cinematic. 24 is not the way we see the world moving along, and 30 is closer to the way we see motion and the way things move. So it looks more realistic. When you get to 60, it looks kind of hyper realistic, and it's probably one of the reasons why so many people have had some problems with 48 frames per second natively, not for off-speed recording, but native in terms of capture and viewing, because it just feels like you're watching a play or something. And there's nothing wrong with that. That experience is a totally different experience for you as the viewer. I tend to lean more towards 24 frames per second, and if you, if you like the other look, it feels a little bit more like news, talk show, soap opera, then go for that. But it's just not something I tend to gravitate to. Do you think you can make an episode about applying for a job, CV, interviews, etc.? I had asked you in the past again, and you said you might. Yeah, Bill, it's a hard one, because I think that between myself, Caleb, and Ben, we are writing proposals, doing budgets, especially Ben and I, on a very regular basis. We are interacting with and having meetings with clients, but we're not generally interviewing for a new job in a standard way. So, generally what we're doing is we're showing the work that we've done, less in a demo reel, but more of, okay, here are completed projects, here's the type of content. I put playlists up on my YouTube channel of things that I've done. And for me, one of my big lanes is creating educational content for companies that are in our industry. So that's a big part of the focus. It's basically a sauna in here right now, by the way. So I'm just telling you like it is. So let's have maybe an offline conversation about that. I mean, I do teach a budgets and proposal class. I do talk about red flags and client stuff. If you look back not that long ago, a month and a half, 2 months ago, I did a live stream for Gearbox where I talk about budgeting and proposals, and there's some good information, I think, inside of that episode if you haven't checked it out. David says, I am currently writing a script for the first time, and I want to try my hand at directing to see if I'm any good, and unless I'm lucky to become Spielberg, I'll be using the camera. Yeah, so if you're directing and DPing, that's a Soderbergh type style, then it's going to be a tremendous amount. I mean, being a director is just, it's an enormous task even on a small project, because you're responsible for everything that has to do with the creative aspect of the project, right? So you have a producer or producers, and you may be the producer, and that's that can be a creative endeavor as well, putting teams together and everything else. But when it comes to day-to-day decisions that are not financial decisions, it's all coming down on the director. So you may want to hold a little bit. You may want to get that script done, really decide where your locations are, what type of style you're looking for in terms of shooting. That might help dictate. I have a book recommendation for you, David. It's called Cinematography for Directors, and I think it's a pretty exceptional book. It's easy to find on Amazon, and it really talks about the relationship between the cinematographer and the director. Part of the job of the director is going to be to get a little bit more educated, if they're not, on the terminology and the craft of cinematography and photography and all of that stuff, because that's going to make your life a lot easier. Because remember that you're the dreamer as the, yes, the writer, but as the director, you dream the script, and then you have to assemble a team, even if you're one of that team creatively, beyond being a director. Maybe you are going to be the DP, of basically realizing the director's dream visually. So production designer and their departments under them, and cinematographer and their departments under them, their jobs in those two departments are really to realize the creative vision that the director has dreamed from that script, whether they wrote that script or not. So I think you've got a lot to think about before you even get to the conversation about what camera you should be buying. It's easy to get caught up into all of that stuff, but what you really need to do is figure out what what this film is, what these locations are, what the style is or styles you gravitate to visually. We have Alexandria available to us to really determine that now. And then you also have your whole knowledge in terms of, you know, of all the films that you've ever watched and how that informs sort of that overall for you creatively. Okay, I'm only going to be able to last a little bit longer here. So we got Chris, better late than never. Hello. And hello, Chris. Glad you're here. Okay. I see, David. You're not saying you're doing both. You're saying unless I'm good at directing, I'll be the cameraman. Understood. Okay, so I think my answer still stays the same. Chris, hope this wasn't covered earlier, but why do I see so many people who are a bit bummed out that the Blackmagic 6K is using Canon EF? I think people are bummed, Chris, and I'm not saying that they should or shouldn't be. Hold on. It's, man, I feel like I don't know. It's cooking in here. They want the RF mount because they look at that mount and they say there's a lot of possibility there. Now, it's an adaptable mount, meaning that you can use other lenses, including EF lenses. And one of the big draws is there is an RF to EF lens adapter, which has ND built into it. So you have it not in the front of the chain, but in between the lens and the camera body. And I think that people really want that. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how Canon takes that concept forward with their own cameras. But that's the deal. Alex, thanks for coming. Believe me, coming now or doing a rewatch is probably better. We have a little bit of a mess in the chat. Thankfully, the way Lightstream, which is my streaming platform, at least right now, works, you don't see a whole bunch of BS coming up. It just starts when it starts, and there you go. Okay, Shazam, the iPad producer, please post your question again. I am going solo here, and normally we're fielding between the three of us on here. I'm scrolling back. Bring me your question. Come on, just post it again. I'm scrolling back to look for it. But if you can post it again, that would be fantastic. I did not go over your question on purpose. I feel a little bit like I've been reprimanded, but that's okay. That's not the first time. So Shazam, the iPad producer, please post your question again right now, and I will address it because I am having a little bit of a hard time finding it, and that's probably because I messed up in the head today. Not really. Let's go. What's the question? All right, other questions, field them right now while I'm waiting for that one. And we'll start to wind down this episode soon. I'm so sorry that Ben and Caleb are not here today. Caleb has just arrived back in his home state after being at the S1H event and learning more about that camera and having some hands-on time. So I'm excited to talk to him about that. Ben was going to be here, but he is in a country, in a place with not only abysmal internet, but also Polish bikers. And that's not a setup for a joke. I'm just, he was going to be doing this episode from an outside lounge chair on the beach at midnight location. It all sounds a little sketchy to me, or as my kids would say, sketch. But there you go. What's the plan for the next stream? You're talking about camera and Flask. The plan is to have everybody here. That's the plan. To show you some exceptional peated Scotch whiskey. That's part of the plan. To talk about a little bit more related to all of these new cameras, but I think we're going to come up with another challenge soon. It might not be this next coming week, but the week after, I'd love to do a camera challenge or a equipment challenge because it's been a long time since we've done one of those. And since people are asking, what would you like the topic to be for next week? Because we're always open to things that people want us to be talking about. You know, we're kind of borderline completely, absolutely 1,000,000% obsessed with all of this stuff. So we're going to be looking at it and reading about it and forming our opinions about it anyway. So what are some of the things, 360 grad Sky, that you'd like to see in terms of a topic, something you'd like us to go over. Would you like us to do another challenge? Would you like us to get into some other aspects of the business? You know, give me some lowdown, and I'm still waiting for Shazam to give me this question again. Do a high dollar one. Yeah, we could do a high dollar challenge. We could definitely do that. They're sometimes fun for conversation. They get a little bit ridiculous, you know, because at a certain point, everybody's going to choose an Alexa or an Alexa Mini. They're not always going to do that, but the chances are they're probably going to do that. And we have to figure out what that high dollar amount is. And the landscape of what is high dollar now has changed a lot, unless you're going with those cameras. Any more classes on lynda.com? Oh, was that a question? I didn't even see it. So the answer to that is probably. I'm waiting for a conversation with them about doing something else with LinkedIn Learning, which is originally lynda.com. I did actually have a course drop very recently, which has to do with corporate multi-camera production. So that is now live in the library. And if you haven't seen that, Shazam, then I would say that that is a new course. There were some hiccups in terms of that getting published, mainly because they had to get some clearance on some of the footage that was internal to LinkedIn Learning or LinkedIn as a company, and they sorted all that stuff out. So if you just go to lynda.com or linkedinlearning.com and you type in Jem Schofield, you'll see the course. It's got a long, long title. Yeah, I have 5 courses now on LinkedIn Learning or lynda.com. Same thing. 2 on lighting, 1 on vlogging for business, 1 on creating a web series for business, and then this new one, which is this multicam. Dude, let me just and dudettes, let me tell you what the heck it's called, because I can't remember the title, which is ridiculous. Jem Schofield. I'm typing in on the very clickety-clack butterfly keyboard. It is called. This means I'm going to have to end soon because I'm going to go to sleep maybe. Corporate event video, producing company meetings and presentations with me. I had a lot of fun doing that one, and I think it's a good primer. I've done a lot of this kind of stuff in the past. It's not stuff that I necessarily create a lot of content on, but let me, you know, have you guys check that out. So, hey, thanks, Shazam. I'm glad you liked those lighting courses. They were fun. Love a lighting kit focused one that you could use in 3 different scenarios. Okay, Sky, I like that one. Noir, I'm not going to have a whole episode on why Canon no longer includes 24 frames per second at 1080. I don't even know where that goes. Thanks, bro. It's taught me a lot. Just being a cameraman, no problem. I would like to talk about accessories that make stuff easier. We've done some of that, but like I don't have like the EVF at the scene being on the back, and like you, I'm blind as F. Why the monitor sucks, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so accessories. Something about lighting or audio for the next episode. Yeah, we could definitely. I mean, I'd like to get back into some lighting stuff with the new spotlight coming in from Aperture and stuff. That's, you know, a great conversation, which are basically modifiers for your lights and things like that. Conversationally, it's very easy to do that on camera and Flask. What I always miss when it comes to those things is not seeing enough stuff, and that's always a little bit difficult with this sort of, you know, this format. But by the time you rig up a $2,000 mirrorless with enough gear, blah, 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 you may as well have considered some of the other entry-level cinema cameras. Yeah, Chris, that's I was talking about that earlier on. I think that the S1H is a good example of that. $4,000 starting price point for the camera body. By the time you build it up, forget about lenses, with all the things that you might want to use for video, you are getting into that price point where you might want to consider a digital cinema camera. That said, full frame, 6K, high data rate, all of those other things, they may be enough to sway you. Mics for 2- and 3-person interviews or events. Okay, Joseph, that's good too. We can definitely get back to an audio episode, an episode on corporate shoot using late 90s gear. Perfect, David. There we go. It's basically going to be a Betacam or a Betacam SP. sorry, a DigiBeta or a Betacam SP camera. And those are your choices. Okay, well, not late 90s. Mini DV was out by then. So you have PD-150, late 90s, and some other camera systems. I'm older than maybe people think, maybe not. So would you recommend the XF400 for music videos, seen your tutorials, and it looks amazing? Shazam, it's a great camera system. I think that for music videos, you're probably better off with a large sensor camera system. You definitely going to be wanting to play with depth of field and a lot of shallow depth of field in most of those situations. I would say an interchangeable lens camera system would be a better bet to look into, especially for music video applications. Do a challenge between you three with the same lights and setups, like an ad or something like that. Bill, I would love to do that. It's a time thing. So, as the channel grows, more people subscribe. These are all good things. The intention, have every intention of spending more and more time on the content I create under the C47. That is the goal. It's hard when you have a channel with under 5,500 people to look at that seriously as a full-time thing. I'm going to continue to do other projects for clients. I've got some stuff cooking right now, and the majority of how I pay my bills is by doing production, producing, directing, and sometimes DPing. The educational part of it is a little bit misunderstood sometimes because so much of the content I create for those companies is educational content. But the reality is that what I do for a living, 85 to 90% of the time, is content creation for other companies. So do I want to do more of this? Absolutely. I have in terms of the space that I'm going to use, almost 3,000 square feet of space that I could convert into content creation for production and post. And I would love to do that. But it means figuring out the right format for the content that I'm doing on this channel so that this channel can grow. I want it to be organic. I want it to grow because people like the content that's on it. But part of that is getting your feedback, and part of it is just, I have my own style, and my style is to educate people, to teach them real stuff on what they're doing. And I'm more and more interested in that aspect of it, less and less interested in the aspect of you need to have this specific thing in order to do your job a certain way. So it's general craft that I'm more interested in teaching, and that's also translating into my live workshops and what I'm doing, and simplifying the amount of equipment that's there and really spending time on getting results in terms of what you're creating. So there you go. DVX 100. I have a DVX 100 in this space right over there. Over there, there's a DVX 100. I could still use it as a mini DV deck, I guess. Talk about a game changer. That was a game changer. EX1, game changer. PD-150, game changer. C300, game changer. Obviously 5D Mark II. All right, enough of that. Joseph uses Countryman mics, B3s, great mics. I am going to do something on a microphone soon, but I am waiting for a part to come in, and then I have my soldering kit, and we'll have a conversation about that in the future. I'm actually melting now, and I don't have any of my anti-shine stuff on, and I think that I need to wrap this thing up because we have gone for a solid hour. I challenge you to a DVX 100 shootout. Let's go, Chris. I'm down. Get me a brand new mini DV tape and I will do it. Dude, look at what I bought on my trip. Check this out. Canon 514 XL Super 8mm camera. It works. Look, turn it on. Listen. Well, okay. I can record at 9 and 18 frames per second with this sucker. F1.4. It goes from a 9 to 45mm. There's a macro on either end. It's got a zoom rocker. Come on. Except for a screen, dude, this is fire. This thing is awesome. I'm loving it. Guess what? 15 pounds in the bookshop. And I did a little cleanup, and I think it's going to be fun. So there you go. Talked about it a little bit earlier on my other live stream. So I understand it's very difficult to invest a large amount of time when this is your main job. I hope the channel grows. Yes, I hope so too. That's what I miss a little bit. We talk about all the gear, but I'd love to learn more from the practical view from you. Look, that's the goal, but it takes a lot of time. You don't create an episode in an hour. You can do a live stream, which is great. I need to build a space out for that, but it's making that investment and that commitment. You know, it's the way it is. I'll try to check out your lighting tutorial. Thank you, David. I just grabbed a Sankyo Super 8. Cool, sweet. Fisher-Price PXL 1000. Dude, that is awesome on audio cassettes. Nothing looks like that camera in terms of footage. Once you figure out how to get film and get a process for that Canon, it's great. Please let me know. Okay, Chris. Well, you know, if Kodak would ever come out with that Super 8 camera that they said they were going to come out with, then I could just use their processing service, and then they would also ingest it and probably digitize it. But wouldn't it be cool if we could just get Super 8mm film for like $10 a cartridge or roll, and we could just have a self-processing system? It would be good. You used to be able to take that stuff to Walmart, by the way. Not that they would ever color time it or it would ever look good. You couldn't tell them to print for skin tones, right? Or process for skin tones, not print, but to process. I'm thinking about stills for, that's a whole other thing, forget it. Jet lag. So what else? Yes, Joseph, I'm definitely thinking about building a set. I mean, this technically is a set. It's like a 16-foot by 16-foot room, but it's not really a set. And we were originally going to paint it, but I liked the way the wood looked, and I said, okay, it'll be a little bit more versatile. But really up there, once this place is weather sealed and insulated and all of that stuff, I plan to create at least one standing set, maybe more, for the content that I'm creating, not only for the C47, but hopefully for clients. Good. All right. I got to end this thing. It's not that I don't love chatting. I love the fact that we have people here. We probably have at least 2 to 3 times as many people if we hadn't had that failure at the beginning. Such is life. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being here for this episode. I'll have a chat with the boys over the next couple of days about next week's episode. I know Ben will be in England. Caleb will be back where he is, and we'll discuss what our options are for next week's episode. I don't know if we'll pull off a challenge. We might. We might do something having to do with audio or lighting. And I think over the next few months, as I honestly believe, we are just going to be inundated with new equipment and so much stuff to think about, to talk about. I'm jet lagged. I'm hot. Not in that way. I'm just boiling in here. And I'm ready to go and chillax. And thank you again, everybody, for hanging in there. We hope to reduce the number of times that these technical issues happen. And yeah, signing off for another episode of Camera and Flask. The only solo episode, I hope, that we ever have of this particular series. And I will work very hard to make sure that that is the case going forward. Take care, everybody, and all the best. Thanks.